Somebody who doesn't have kids, well, that's not their priority. You might be able to retire 5 or 10 years earlier than somebody with kids. The point is, if I can spend my money to zero, well, it might take less money for me to retire than the person who's not spending their money to zero.
When you need some advice, never sacrifice, always get it right. Ask the Planman. Finance, insurance, and more.
Welcome to Ask the Planman. I'm your host, Bruce Weinstein, and I have a belief that each and every one of us needs to have a concrete, solid financial plan. Retirement plan is different than a college plan, is different than a tax plan, is different than your weight loss plan, it's different than your vacation plan. So overall, planning is imperative if you want to get where you want to be, when you want to be there. Everybody needs a plan. Today, we're going to talk about DINKS. Double income, no kids. Or single income. Is it called a sink? That's where you put your water and your dishes. But sinks and DINKs are people who have assets and resources that are built up for whatever reasons in their personal lives, no children, no direct heirs. And so the viewpoints of how they handle the distribution, the spend down of their assets tend to be greatly different than somebody who has heirs, meaning children and grandchildren. And too often in my 37-year career, have I heard people saying, well, I don't want to spend all that money down. I want to make sure my kids get something. I want to leave a bequest to them. I want my grandkids to get something. I want to pay for my grandkids' college. Like, they're selfless in that sense of they want to have the money go to the next generations. We touched on the last episode, and I'll just bring it in, is you can do some life insurance, trust work. You can recreate assets for them. You don't necessarily have to sacrifice the use of your own money to do that. If you have heirs you want to leave the money to, you can use life insurance and trusts to create tax-free income for them and leverage your assets. But today we're going to talk about people who don't have the heirs to be focused on. And so the strategies and the way you can go about building people's financial plans works more on the back end of a streamlined or regulated spend down method. So why is that important? Well, Allie, do you and Glenn want to die with $5 million in the bank?
Nope.
Would you have liked to have spent your money down to a more reasonable amount, take away the fears of running out of money, and enjoy that money in a much more rigorous way?
Yeah, ideally. Maybe save a little for, my sister and foundations and nonprofits.
Oh, again, that's a great point. So charitable gifting could be part of the equation. I don't have any episodes yet, but I did a very large charitable remainder trust case years ago to the tune of over $5 million and created massive amounts, over $3 million of tax savings to the client and over $400,000 of revenue stream to them. So charitable remainder trusts are a good way to do something like that for somebody like yourself, Allie, where you're pledging the money. This is kind of off the cuff sidebar, but you're pledging the money to that charitable organization in exchange for lifetime income. Mm-hmm. And we can facilitate that. We can recreate assets if need be. But at the end of the day, when you're gone, the charity gets the remainder, charitable remainder trust. So that's one way a DINK family can proactively dedicate or use their assets and do something in that regard. But if you don't want to give your money away, well, how do you facilitate spending it down and making sure your bases are covered? So the last episode, we talked about reverse mortgage and we talked about long-term care. Now, again, that's a perfect tie-in for our DINKs and sinks. Can't forget the sink. Not everybody's got two incomes. So if I'm single, how do I spend my money down? What am I afraid of? How do I get the most use out of my home? Well, that's the reverse mortgage. So we can spend that money down. I don't care if the asset is shrunk to zero. I don't care if whoever picks it up, my niece or nephew or the charity, if there's $3,000 left at the end of it, so be it. I wanted to maximize the value of that home, but I wanted to keep my home. Long-term care, same conversation. Again, listen to the last episode. We talk about how you can facilitate purchasing long-term care, spending your money down, having the long-term care policy kick in for those medical expenses of nursing home, assisted living, home health care. So the DINK, they're going to be focusing on accumulating their assets, calculating this. See, to me, this is where the linchpin comes into play here. I believe a non-heir scenario. I don't even know how to say that. So somebody with no kids, right? And I have kids. I'm not trying to diminish it, but they're darn expensive, right? But at the end of the day, I have a value system that I want to leave my kids something, right? Now, somebody who doesn't have kids, well, that's not their priority. So my retirement might take longer to get to because I need a bigger sum of money, or the sum of money I have no intention of spending to zero because I want my kids to get whatever's left over. Okay. In your scenario, if I may, right? You guys don't have kids, so we can tie in for you and Glenn as a real scenario, is you might be able to retire 5 or 10 years earlier than somebody with kids. Now, that's subjective, obviously, and I'm just kind of making that statement. But the point is, if I can spend my money to zero, well, it might take less money for me to retire than the person who's not spending their money to zero, because the person who's not spending their money is never tapping into that asset. So if I've got $2 million, and in Allie's case, she can spend an extra $100,000 a year, well, then that's less pressure on more money because the $100,000 is coming from the nest egg. It's not coming from the principal, meaning the interest on the principal. So the scenarios play out very differently. And so in your financial plan, you can calculate a spend down and a diminishment of the asset base. We touched on the 2 episodes back, if we're keeping these sequential, Allie, is our freestyling episodes. Episode 1, we talked about flipping the switch and turning on cash flow and being concerned about spending down the money, or the little old lady who's buying CDs has to cannibalize her principal. So her CD rate went from 8% to 5% to 1%. Her bills didn't go down. She's got to spend the CD instead of rolling it over. She has $100,000 come due every year, and instead of rolling it over at 1%, she's got to spend it down to pay her bills for that year. So now she's down to $900,000. That's okay for a sink and a dink, right? It could be, because it depends on how much money they have and what the spend down, that lines crossing. Again, we're touching on the previous episode. Your lines crossing is when your asset base is not deriving enough income to meet your expenses. And so you're cannibalizing your assets. You're taking a bite out of the nest egg, right? It's an egg, so you can eat it. So I'm going to eat my egg and I'm going to keep chopping away. And eventually I could run out of egg. And that's the fear, is running out of money. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep.
Questions?
Well, so things to just kind of bring up that I feel DINKs have maybe, and I could see this also applying to people with kids, but some things that we keep in mind as we're planning for our retirement are, 1, pets, and making sure that if we leave before our pets do, that they're taken care of. So while we don't have children, we do have pets, and those are our children.
Fur babies are babies. Yeah.
So that's a big concern for us, is making sure that they're taken care of, but also then also making sure we're taken care of, because we don't have kids to take care of us when we get older.
Right.
So, and you hear all these horror stories of people going into these nursing homes and being abused. So how can we make sure we're protecting ourselves when we don't have kids looking out for us?
Great question. So obviously on the fur babies, like anything else, you can put instructions in your will on asset preparation, cash flow, distribution to take care of the pet's needs, till they're gone. No different than assigning a guardian to your child. You can say, Aunt Mary's going to take Bobo and Miss Muffy, and we're going to give them $10,000 a year out of our estate to take care of them till they're both gone, right? So you can define that. You could leave it open-ended. You could put a dollar amount, whatever it is. And again, like we touched on before, is you can create a life insurance trust to fund it if you've decided to spend or give away those dollars. So if you used a charitable remainder trust, what's going to happen is at death, all that's going to stop and the money's going to go to the charity. But if you had a life insurance trust to go with it, you use some of that cash flow from the charitable remainder trust. Well, now you pick up a $100,000 policy, and then that'll kick in when you're gone, and then that trust is there to take care of your pets, right? So no different than, maybe a child. And so, again, that's planning, right? Estate planning, tax planning, financial planning, retirement planning. So, your exit planning is out of your business, but your exit planning out of this world is tied to your estate plan. So you can do some work in that regard. What was the other component you said was the nursing home side? So
taking care.
Yeah, well, this is a problem. I'll plug my buddy Russ. Russ has a special needs child. Russ is an estate planning attorney that I've used for many years. And Russ, as 25 million other American families have encountered, has a special needs child. And as an estate planning attorney, very well versed on things that need to be done, and quickly realized the big disconnects on medical coordination, financial coordination. What does the kid like to do? What does the kid not like to do? Who's going to take him to the ball game when the Mets are in town, right? Because he's a big Met fan, whatever it is. So I always refer back to the movie Rain Man with Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. Well, that's a special needs situation. Now, you can't necessarily say Dustin Hoffman was an elderly person at that point, right? Raymond was probably in his 40s or 50s at that point in time, but he'd already been institutionalized. He was provided with care, and he probably could have lived 30 plus more years, and somebody had to pay for that. Somebody had to coordinate his care. They put him in that institution and had to pay for that institution. And so here comes Tom Cruise along, and he's like, well, I can get my hands on all that money. I'm going to grab him out of there. I'll provide his care. And chaos ensues, right? And he eventually realizes, like, Raymond's got to go back to the facility. It's not good for Raymond, right? So what Russ did is Russ has created, so we'll plug it here, hopetrust.com. And he's derived it for the special needs children, which is a place to coordinate all of their needs, medical, prescriptions, financial, doctors, routines, in a platform for parents to organize for when they're gone and who's going to take care of that kid. And so I said to Russ, and there is an episode, folks, in my early releases, go back in our library. I have Russ on maybe around episode 15 or so. And we're talking about special needs trust. And I said to him, well, this conveys for elderly. Why wouldn't somebody want to have the same game plan? Plan man. We're planning, we're being proactive. So if I'm doing that for my 2-year-old to make sure that they're going to be taken care of for the rest of their lives, how about Nanny, who's 93 and has no heirs left? Who's going to take care of and make sure she's getting the things, as you said, she's not in an abusive environment, nobody's preying on her money, ripping them off, like who's protecting all of that? So I think Russ is working on another platform tied to that where you can build out more of a senior game plan and distribution as well. So in regards to what you're saying that I know for sure is you and Glenn would sit down with an estate planning attorney. You would put together trustees and or guardians, executors, the term executors usually at somebody's passing, but when you're in a diminished capacity, look, folks, a will does a lot more than just basic what to do with the money. You have to have durable power of attorneys, medical power of attorneys. When somebody becomes incapacitated, who's making the decisions for them? How do you be able to get the empowerment for medical decisions and financial decisions? And how are bank accounts and brokerage accounts titled? Because if Allie's got accounts in her own name, Glenn can't get at them. If I'm managing their money and she's got an investment with me and Glenn calls and says, Allie's in the hospital, she's in a coma, I need $100,000, SOL. You better show me a power of attorney. Yeah, I've got a power of attorney. I have the right to take it. I have that on file. Now I can send Glenn that $100,000 to pay those bills. So again, planning, estate planning is a big piece of this, Allie. I don't know if we're going down that rabbit hole, but in regards to all of this stuff that we're talking about, we're free flowing, is all these different pieces. This is why planning is so imperative. There's so many components and mechanisms that have to go into the conversation and considerations. And so even though you asked me one question, I opened up two other doors. There's two other things here. And so that's why these things are so important, is to get yourself surrounded by trusted advisors that are giving you the proper guidance. So me as a financial advisor, I'm going to bring in tax planners. I'm going to bring in estate planners. We're going to make sure that you've got ironclad plans in place. And if you need to implement certain things like single premium and annuity for cash flow, if you need to do long-term care, if you need to do a reverse mortgage, we'll bring in people to do those components for you. And if you need something like a Hope Trust, well, then you could house all of those things and have the proper people in place for succession plans. You know, what happens if I've got a 2-year-old and I'm 40, what's that life expectancy versus mine? And what happens when I go and that special needs person's still alive? Well, who's taking over? So who's the new guardian? And what happens if that guardian died before the special needs person? So now I got a 67-year-old special needs person that lost 2 guardians. So you need contingencies. You need things in place to make sure things are provided for, the right people in place. So for you as an elderly person, it conveys into that conversation. Who can you put in place, family member or not, to help make those decisions for your benefit, right, at your bequest, and make sure that they have your utmost care, prioritized, right? It's not about them and, I can make an extra $5,000 if I don't do that. And, leave her over here in a ward instead of a private room, right? Like, no, like her intentions were to pay for. I tell clients all the time, when you get to a point of needing assisted living and care, would you love to be on a beach in Aruba with somebody fanning you with leaves and feeding you grapes and living in this big, fancy, palatial location? Well, yeah, if I got money, like, why wouldn't I want to be that instead of in a facility, that's all, steel and cold, and there's 6 people in the room, and I'm, my bedpan's dirty. Like, well, that's all about quality of care and quality of choice. And so you have that control. So you have to decide how you want to take care of it. Warren Buffett could go to any place in the world he wants, and he could spend $100,000 a day and never run out of money, right? He could go to the Taj Mahal of nursing homes. So, you can't get what you don't have the ability to pay for. And so you have to have proper planning. You have to put those things in place. Did I answer your question all right?
Yep. And it's actually funny, as you were talking, it reminded me of a story of this woman who single, no attachments to anything. I don't know if she's still around, but lived her retirement on cruise ships, essentially just bouncing from cruise ship to cruise ship.
It's a big boom, and the cruise lines know it. So you can literally take a year-long cruise for a lower cost than moving into a nursing home or assisted living facility. The prices have done such. And you're going to get your meals, you're going to get entertainment, they're going to clean your room, and there's a doctor on board if you need it. Here's the ultimate optimism I heard the other day. A 90-year-old person, I think a woman, just booked a 3-year round-the-world cruise. I'm sitting there going, 90-year-olds don't buy green bananas. And she's booking a 3-year cruise. God bless her. I hope she enjoys every minute of it. But yeah, we've had a friend of mine's mother just did a 6-month cruise. The dad had passed away. She's in her early 70s. Money is not a challenge. And she told her kids, like, I'm going on a cruise for 6 months. I'll see you Thanksgiving. And I'm like, how's it going? He's having a blast. Well, guess what? There's all these other single people on the cruise. They've got their own clubs and friends. They're scattered around the world in the country. Now they have other places to go and visit. And she's booking for herself another cruise for a year. And what they're going to do is they're going to get off at certain people's locations. So let's say I met you and you live in France. She's going to get off when they're stopping in France and go visit that friend, or the friend, is on the ship, will get off. They'll spend some time touring France, and they'll pick up the boat over in Spain. And they'll just keep bouncing around. So she's got this whole new lifestyle around traveling tied to the cruise ship because it's a floating hotel. And so, hey, if you got the money, man, like, why not? Like, that's, unless you get seasick, but I don't think people are worried about that. But yeah, so nursing homes are expensive. And if you're physically capable and able, it could be cheaper to be on that cruise ship for 9 months, a year, or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, the
Way to
cruise
live,
lines,
right?
cruise lines are catering to it. They're actually catering to it now.
Oh yeah, they want it.
Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you want a customer locked in for 12 months or 3 years? Like, I'm sure she's got a refund policy in there somewhere. But yeah, the cruise ships are building out their fleets to accommodate the demand. If the demand is for it, or they created demand for it, well, here you go. Here's a ship. Jump on, jump off, come and go as you want, and we'll see you in 2 months in China. Okay, I'll be back in China. It's beautiful. What else you got?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one way for sure. Especially if you've got nothing really attaching you to what is the story I heard. She actually sold her house in that story. Like, this is her retirement plan, is entirely on the ships. And as somebody who is, dual income, no kids, we've talked about it. We've talked about retiring in our 50s. We've talked about still retiring young enough to be able to go out and explore the world. And because we don't have like those attached children who are going into college that we now have to think about, it allows so much more flexibility for us to kind of plan what we want to do.
Yeah. The other side, we talked about the long-term care, is you also have these, what they call CCRCs, community care retirement centers or something. So those are potentially facilities you can buy into. You tend to have to come in when you're healthier. Age, doesn't matter as long as you're healthy. They don't usually want somebody who's already cognitively impaired. So there's some memory tests or challenges. But people will sell their home and move into this place. So my dad and stepmother have been in there. He's 87. They moved in when he was 80. So they're there 7 years. So they sold their home in Connecticut. They moved into this facility, and it has layers of services as they need them. And by buying in and paying a modest monthly fee, they're guaranteed, should they ever run out of money, they're never kicked out because they bought in. So they have a 2-bedroom apartment. They get weekly cleaning. They get 2 meals a day. There's a bowling alley, a movie theater, a gym, doctors on staff. And they have down the hall, they have underground tunnels because it's in Connecticut. And so if somebody took ill, well, they're in the next building for more skilled care. And all she has to do is walk under the tunnel in the snowstorm. She doesn't have to drive. She doesn't go across town. And so these are being built by the hospitality industry. A lot of them are being built by the Marriotts and the Hiltons because they understand hospitality. They're managing a hotel and they're putting in the food and the other facilities. And this is where you're seeing the population age growth explode, because they've got dozens of 100-year-olds. Because we're social animals. These people have a reason to get up every day and meet Stella for breakfast. And then we're going to go to the knitting class and we're going to go play Mahjong, and then we're going to catch the 4 p.m. movie before bed. And then we'll have dinner. And so if you have purpose to get up every day, you're not going to whittle away. And then if their health starts to diminish or their memory's starting to go, well, on property is everything they need. And that's become a big trend. So, think of the cruise, to tie it back. A cruise may not have all those kind of facilities, but they have some of them. And obviously, if the person becomes very ill, they'll have to put them in a more of a hospital facility. But yeah, need you to wheel you to breakfast. They'll come get you in your cruise ship and take you to breakfast. Like it's just a matter of what you need. So, CCRCs are another option people have. So you can have your own insurance. You can buy long-term care insurance, and that'll pay benefits for the ADLs, as we've touched on, activities of daily living. And that'll be able to pay for where you want to be. And you have that choice of where you want to be, because here's a check. You can buy into a facility. You can forego your asset, right? There's no reverse mortgage here. They sold their house. They took that money and they bought into a facility. That's a decision. Buy on a cruise line, prepay for 3 years, I guess. Have an option. So again, it's woody woofy. What do you want for yourself? What do you enjoy? What do you want to do? Where do you see yourself? And then you build out your financial picture your plan accordingly. But knowing your options, how many people before today's episode didn't know they could take a year-round cruise? So all of a sudden they're like, I might like that. Allie brought that up.
3 years.
Bruce's clients have done that. Oh, okay. Maybe let's check that out. Let me call Royal Caribbean, see what they got. Did we hit all your questions?
Yep, we got them.
All right, folks, I'm going to bring us home. Allie, thanks again for joining us here. We've been freestyling with Ask the Planman. I'm your host, Bruce Weinstein. Again, we're talking about CCRCs and DINKS. We got to look up if CCRCs exist because we're going to have to brand that. CCRCs, single income, no kids. DINKS, double income, no kids. How do people without the pressures, demands, desires of leaving their assets behind to their family, their kids, their grandkids, how do they handle? What can they do? What's different for them in their financial scenario? What kind of options and back end? And Allie, what did I say earlier in one of our episodes? If I had a toe tag, if I had a tattoo that showed your expiration date, that I knew this is when you're departing the earth we know it, I could make the perfect plan. But we don't have that toe tag. We don't have tattoos that say my milk expired Friday. Well, I got a plan. And so we need the plan, man. Everybody needs a plan out there. You got to be proactive. I hope the show's brought you some value. I need you to like, share, subscribe. If you're a little bit younger and this conversation's for your parent or your grandparent, hey, send it to them. Let them know they got some options here. Well, if they're dinks, they don't have kids. But if you got an aunt and an uncle and you're hoping to get some inheritance money, send this episode to them and we'll get you on the short list for inheritance. Folks, all kidding aside, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit us up at asktheplanman.com. Hit us up at 844-PLANMAN. Anything social media, Ask the Planman. Planman.tv is our YouTube channel. I can't be here without you guys. We'd love to hear your questions, your comments, your concerns. We've been freestyling the last couple of episodes. We're going to be looking to bring you more of those. Let me know how you like them. Until next time, when you need some advice, always get it right. Come Ask the Planman. Thanks to my co-host, Allie, for joining us today. Folks, we'll see you next time.
When you need some advice, never sacrifice, always get it right. Ask the Planman. Finance, insurance, and more.